Hi, in this video I will talk about the basics of using data layer in Google Tag Manager. We'll start with a bit of theory so that you will understand what it is and how it works. Then I will create some data layer code and I will show you several examples of how to use data layer for advanced web analytics implementations. Hello there, welcome to Ads Courses. If you're looking for a channel with more advanced and unique PPC and web analytics tricks and strategies, you're in the right place. If you want to support this channel, subscribe and share it. Okay, now let's dive in. Okay, so I will start with explaining to you in the simplest way what exactly data layer is. And I think that this illustration is showing it is actually in the most accurate and simple way. So as you can see, simply put, you have your website and you've got data layer connected to your website data. And data layer, as the name suggests, is just a layer of data. It's just a place to store the data, right? That can be easily sent to your TMS, for example, Google Tag Manager, right? It's a tag management system that later reprocesses this data and sends it to your application layer, for example, to Google Analytics, Google Ads, Facebook, and any other platform via tags. In other words, the most common way to define the data layer is through the use of what is sometimes referred to universal data objects, which is written in JavaScript programming language. And of course, the types of data contained in the data layer can be numerous and varied. It could be, e-commerce, transaction information, web behavior data, mobile application usage. I will cover this later in this video. And why would you want to use the data layer and TMS in general, tag management system? And one of the main functions of tag management is to actually easily map the data collected during the interaction on your website, on your mobile application, and send it to your digital channels, for example, or analytical channels for different goals, for different purposes. It could be, a better customer experience. It could be, analyzing the customer behaviors, or just using other platforms and systems. And when data layer is properly defined, tag management system can easily ensure that, for example, product name is conveyed to your web analytics provider in the same way it is your affiliate tracking system, and so on and so on. But in general, using a TMS is good because you have all of your tags in one place, organized. And Google Tag Manager is a good example of a very good TMS. Okay, so you can use data layer and Google Tag Manager for many different purposes, but there are some most common ways to actually use it. And the first one is for marketing and analytical codes implementation, for example, to implement Google Ads conversion tracking or remarketing codes, Google Analytics integration, Facebook Pixel, Hotjar, and other platforms and systems that you would want to use that require some code implementation into your website or your mobile application. Another one is very commonly used in e-commerce industry, and it's simply Google Analytics e-commerce module. So you can implement this module and send product data into Google Analytics via using data layer, for example. It's the best way actually to do it. And we've got Google Analytics events tracking, because if you will use data layer, if you want to, implement advanced web analytics into your website, you would use a lot of events. You would want to use a lot of events, and you can easily track them with data layer implementation. So these are just the most common ways to use data layer. And here's an example of data layer from an e-commerce website. So you've got a lot of variables here that you can send. These are just examples. You could send everything you want that you can actually gather into data layer. Of course, you shouldn't send everything. For example, there are some privacy limitations that you can't send, for example, user's phone number publicly into data layer. But other than that, you can send everything that you could think of. So in this example, we've got a lot of variables for product. We've got product description, product name, we've got price discounts, season, year, you've got shop name, it could be SKU, all the product data in this example could be stored in data layer. But that's just an example. And why is it actually important to use data layer and to use Google Tag Manager? And to put it simple, you will just have a clean and organized data. And the more data you have, having it in an organized and clean way would be a challenge, right? So that's why you should use TMS. Everything is in one place, the performance is better, and it's easy to debug and to manage. Okay, so here are some other examples of data points that you can use. So like in the example above, we had product category, product name, product information in general, SKU, price, etc. But you could also send content information like article, author, article category, and so on. And finally, you have events, right? So it could be a product view, a purchase, right? But also you can implement virtual page view with data layer. You could implement form tracking. When someone, for example, submits your form on the website, to track it, you can use data layer and Google Tag Manager to send it to Google Analytics, for example, but also form field tracking. So if you have a longer form on your website, you would want to track the answers for analytical purposes. You can track, of course, form field with Google Tag Manager with data layer implement. And of course, automated timing events and almost everything that you would want and could accept of, private personal data of your users. So these are also just an examples. The possibilities are almost endless here. Okay, so enough of the theory. I will show you how it looks in practice on some very simple data layer examples. But in general, to use data layer, you would want to implement the data layer on your website, create variables, and then create a tag with a specified trigger. So the rule that will fire up your tag, which will use the data layer from your website. Okay, so I'm on this simple website where we have a form, and I'm in the Google Tag Manager debug mode. So if you're in Google Tag Manager, you would want to click the preview button on the upper right and refresh your website, and you will see this this panel here, which you can use for debugging. So if you would go into data layer, you would see the data layer that is, sent in this moment into Google Tag Manager. So for example, I've got this event here from data layer. It's a search event when someone is searching something on the website, and we've got variables of this event category and event action, right? And the values of these variables. So if I would fill this form up, we would see a different data layer that is sent when someone submits the form. So let's just put something here and send it. And as you can see, I already have a tag for this event in Google Tag Manager. But if you would go to data layer, you would see this data layer. This is a data layer event that is sent when someone submits correctly the form. There's an event name. Don't put spaces in here in the event name. And we've got variables. It could be something totally different, but because this is used for Google Analytics goals and events. So if you want to send it to Google Analytics as an event, most likely you would want to send event category and event action and event label. So it would be good to have these variables here and put something in there. It makes just everything very simple and fast. So I've got this event category, which means actually, contact form, and event action, and the name of the form that was sent. And this is sent to Google Tag Manager, and this fires up the tag. So you would want to create a trigger of a tag based on this data here, based on this event and based on these variables. If you want to, fire it up on a specific value of these variables. If not, you just fire up tag on this event. Okay, so to do it, you would want to create these variables that we had before, right, in this event. So we've got event category and event actions. I added the DL, which means data layer. And here I'm in the variables section in Google Tag Manager, and down below you've got user-defined variables. Because here you have the built-in variables. I have a separate video about click tracking and using the built-in variables, which is a very easy way to track clicks and interactions on your website, but it's not perfect, because if you will change something on your website, these values of these variables will most likely will change. For example, if you use like click text, click URL, click element, click classes, they may change, so you will stop tracking these events. And if you have a lot of them, you won't have control of that. Okay, so you can watch the other video about this topic later. Data layer is the better option, always better option. It requires some additional actions. It requires some IT action or some programming, because you would need to implement the data layer code into your website properly, right? And send the data there properly. But other than that, this is way better option to do it. It's way more stable to use data layer. So, you just click, new variable. So in this example, it will be a data layer variable, and you put this name of the event here. The name is the actual variable from the data layer, so it will be event category and the event action as a separate variable. So, right, you give it a name and you save it. I already have this in here and in here. So I have them and I can use them in my triggers. Okay, so now I'm in my tags and I can see my tag configuration. This is a Google Analytics event, so I select this while creating the tag. So you simply, select Google Analytics Universal Analytics, and you select event here, because this will be a Google Analytics event, and you put your category and action. That's why I named them event category and event action in the variables and in data layer, because it's easier to do it later. Because when I would add different forms, for example, I can just use the same data layer, the same variables, and it will populate it in here and show them. I wouldn't need to modify this tag, right, or data layer. And you select your Google Analytics ID and you create your trigger. And your trigger would be the event of this data layer. So mine is form sent. So I create, let's just show you this. This is a custom event. So you select custom event from the trigger type, and you just input the event name. It must be exactly the same as in data layer without any spaces. And you can, trigger fires on all custom events. Or if you want, you could, add some additional rule, for example, when the event category equals something specific. If you want to just fire this up on a specific event category. If not, you just fire it up on all custom events and you save it. And you can debug this in here. And as you could see before, this fired up when I did submit the form, and I have this data here. It works. So this was just a very simple example of data layer used for Google Analytics event tracking and how to configure it in Google Tag Manager. Of course, in practice, sometimes it would be more sophisticated, but it was an example of how to track forms with data layer. Okay, so to end this video, some good practices for implementing data layer on your website. So the first one is define data layer objects at the top of every page, and then push the additional data elements to the object with data layer push commands, right? So you need to keep in mind that the tag needs to be firing up when the data layer is already there, right? Because obviously it won't work if it's not. So now you know what data layer is and how to create basic data layer to implement it on your website. Let me know if you have any questions in the comment section below. If you want to support this channel, simply hit the subscribe button. That's all for today. See you in my next video. Bye.